history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. So even though we might find ourselves in a similar situation today, those situations are still going to be different to some extent. And so I think, therefore, the art that arises because of that situation should also be different as well.
Y'all make excellent points. I kind of agree with both of y'all, but more so, uh, like specifically in the question, is it ethical to change the historical meaning? But in this case, the historical meaning would be like women only are motivated because of their sex drives. But also, like Nathan said, if you change, if you have to change that many aspects of a play to make it enjoyable by modern standards, is it still its play, the original play? And at that point, why put on that play? Just choose another play, if that makes sense. But that's what's my take on it. Okay. Next question. How might we continue to perform these shows in an ethical way?
So I kind of this is kind of similar to like what you just talked about and kind of what I just talked about. Because I would say like I think a lot of shows like these historical shows that kind of had a lot have a lot of these problems. I think they kind of should be evaluated on a case by case basis. As saying, I would argue that historical shows should be evaluated on a case by case basis to see whether or not they can be performed ethically. I think that certain shows, because of the context they were written in, like Lysistrata, shouldn't really be performed today just because of the dangers of bringing outdated messaging to a modern audience that, and at least in the case of America, kind of largely lacks, media literacy. Um, and so I think shows that fall into this category, like I said, like Lysistrata, shouldn't necessarily be performed as much as they should be analyzed and studied in a literary sense. I kind of think Lysistrata's value is most prominent when it is examined kind of exactly how we're examining it right now, in its original form with the original social context that surrounded it, which I think allows us to think critically about future pieces of art that try to employ similar messaging as Lysistrata and hail themselves as these like very, feminist kind of pieces. And so, all in all, I think the anti-feminist nature inherent to the show is kind of too tricky to be worked around to really allow the show to be formed in an ethical way. And that's kind of what I was also talking about my last question. Like I think it's so inherent to the show that I think like we should kind of just leave it be, kind of study it, and then kind of just move forward with new pieces of art that are more reflective of the current social norms.
I agree wholeheartedly with that stance. Uh, and like alternatively, we have to be ethical by today's standards. Like we can't, if we were putting on the show, we can't exaggerate too much and be absurdly offensive, uh, because we don't have that excuse. Oh, but it was written in ancient Greek. Okay, we're not in ancient Greek. And obviously, this play is not sensitive by today's standards. And in another point, if the point is that it's a comedy, and if it's not comedic by today's standards, then you're not achieving the purpose of the play. So at that point, by perform it, I think it's much better analyzed rather than performed, like um, was said.
Yeah, I think I agree with both of you. I think, like both of you said, it's better to kind of how we're doing right now, studying this play in a historical context. But if we were to like, how would we put this on if we had to? I think you have to make these ethical choices when if you were to put on this production, like you have to we gotta remember the historical context of which it was why it was written, what it was performed, and maybe highlight not everything from the show, but certain themes like what I read, like unity or peace or maybe questioning gender roles, stuff like that, and maybe highlight certain aspects of the show if you were to put it on. But I mainly agree that with what everyone was saying, I think it should be more studied than performed at where we're at in today.